And after you were brought on, you developed an understanding that Mr. Depp's financial status was very challenging, correct?
It was challenging, but we had an ability to resolve the problems if they were properly addressed.
He had liquidity problems, right?
He had substantial assets in excess of his liabilities, but he had short-term obligations that needed to be satisfied.
Let me just ask that again. At the time that you were brought on, he had liquidity problems, correct?
Can you define liquidity for me?
I'm asking you. At the time he was brought on, he had liquidity problems, correct?
I would define the term liquidity as where the short-term assets are less than the short-term, are less than the short-term liabilities. And if that's how you're defining liquidity, I would agree.
In layman's terms that I can understand, because I don't speak all the kind of business school terms that you speak, he didn't have enough money at the time, correct? He was spending more than he was bringing in, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you gave him advice about how he could hopefully get out of that problem, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, Mr. White, because you've testified to some degree of knowledge about wine that you allege that Ms. Heard requested, so you seem to have some knowledge of Mr. Depp's spending. Ms. Heard didn't buy any of the dozens of properties that Mr. Depp owned, correct?
Correct. He owned the assets prior to their marriage.
She didn't pay $5 million to blast Hunter Thompson's ashes out of a cannon, did she?
Not to my knowledge.
She didn't buy a yacht that she couldn't afford and then have to sell it to J.K. Rowling, did she?
Not to my knowledge.
Now let's talk about that meeting on April 21st, 2016. You said the meeting started at about 7:30 p.m.?
Yes.
And lasted till maybe 9:30, is that right?
Yes.
And you have no idea, no personal knowledge where Mr. Depp went after he left that meeting, do you?
That is correct. I did not go with him. I went home.
And at that meeting, Mr. Depp was given some catastrophic news about his business, correct?
He was given news that he needed to address a number of financial issues, but I had a strategy and plan to fully resolve them.
That news that he was given that night was catastrophic, wasn't it?
No.
May I approach, Your Honor?
All right. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. White, let's do this again with another under oath series of statements. You gave testimony in the UK trial, did you not?
Yes.
And that testimony was under oath, correct?
Yes.
All right. And in front of you, I have your testimony from the UK trial, and you gave that testimony on behalf of Mr. Depp, correct?
I gave it honestly.
Okay. You gave it on behalf of Mr. Depp, correct? You were one of his witnesses called.
That is correct.
Okay. Can you please turn to page 865? And it's just the second page of the document, upper left. Before that, the questions are talking about this meeting on April 21st, 2016. And you were asked the question, now Mr. Depp was given some catastrophic news about his business. Answer, that is correct. Did I read that right?
You did, but remember,
that was just
when
my
I get a
question.
chance
You
to
answered my
respond,
question, sir. You answered
I
my
did not
question.
define that term.
Sir, Mr. You'll have a chance. The attorney will get back up and redirect you, okay? So if you could just answer his question, that's fine.
And the reason I'm asking, sir, is because you just gave the exact opposite testimony here. So that's why we pointed that out. Now, you at this meeting, you had a discussion about his financial affairs and a necessity to formulate a revised business strategy and plan, correct?
Yes.
And you talked about the following financial information. You talked about bank obligations and tax liabilities, right?
Yes.
Which means money you owe to either the government or banks, correct?
Yes.
You talked about assets that he needed to sell, correct?
Yes,
Properties and things like that he needed to sell to generate money.
correct?
You talked about ways to reduce spending, correct?
Yes,
And you talked about how to get new engagements, correct?
yes.
How to get new gigs, right?
Not how to get them, but
The
I
need to
encourage
get
him to get them. I'm not an
Understood.
agent.
I appreciate
do not
that.
procure his engagements.
And understood. You talked about the need to get new gigs to generate additional money to help address these financial woes that he was experiencing, correct?
Yes,
You also told him at that meeting that his taxes, he hadn't paid taxes in years, correct?
no, that's not correct. That he had not paid any taxes in years is not correct.
That he was significantly delinquent in federal tax obligations dating back years, correct?
I don't know how you're defining years. There were delinquent liabilities. I addressed them and formulated a plan.
And you talked about the significant delinquent tax liabilities that would run into the millions of dollars for taxes unpaid, correct?
That is correct.
And so after receiving this catastrophic news, as we discussed, you have no idea where Mr. Depp went when he walked out of the doors of his office, correct?
I do not know
Okay.
where he went.
Can you pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 936, please? And Mr. White, I'm not gonna, this is a long document that we can scroll through, but what I'll represent to you, and Michelle can sort of scroll down, is that these appear to be Mr. Depp's tax returns for Mr. Depp and his companies from 2009 to 2019. Do you see that?
Yes,
And these are returns as part of your role as his CPA firm now, his business manager firm now. Your firm prepares these tax returns, correct?
yes,
And you maintain these tax returns in the ordinary course of your business, correct?
that is correct.
Your Honor, I know there's going to be plenty of redaction to do, but I just would like to move these into evidence. I don't plan to publish them or anything at this point.
You want to approach? All right, so 936 will come into evidence, but I'll wait for redactions and they will not be published, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. White, you understood that Mr. Depp showed up hours late for work on Pirates 5, correct?
That is not correct.
Are you familiar with Tracy Jacobs?
Yes,
That's Mr. Depp's former agent, correct?
yes,
And at the time that she was serving as his agent, part of her job responsibilities, to the best of your understanding, was to communicate with you about Mr. Depp's financial affairs, correct?
to the extent she had knowledge,
Right.
yes, she would communicate.
And you and she did communicate about Mr. Depp, correct?
During the period of engagement, yes, we did communicate.
Okay. Can you pull up Defendant's Exhibit 874, please, Michelle? Mr. White, do you see here this text exchange between you and Tracy Jacobs?
Yes,
And your texts are in white and Ms. Jacobs are in blue, correct?
yes.
Michelle, could you please scroll to the document that is Bates stamped DEP 19246? It's about the fifth or sixth one down, please. Mr. White, do you see here the third text down from Tracy Jacobs to you saying, thanks, I got a call from Disney last week saying he showed up 5 hours
Objection, Your
late
Honor,
for
hearsay.
ADR. It's not hearsay, it's party opponent. She's his agent. I'm happy to approach if you'd like to discuss. Mr. White, we just saw the text that I started reading. Do you remember that text?
Yes,
Okay, we're just gonna show you and move for admission of that page of the document with that text. So I just wanted, since you won't see anything else, I just wanted you to orient yourself that is the text that we were just reading, okay?
fine.
Your Honor, that page or that text?
They're going to redact it, just that one text.
Thank you.
Your Honor, I would move for admission of this document as, I guess we could call it Defendant's 874A.
Okay, 874A with the redactions, all right, thank you.
Mr. White, you just testified a few minutes ago that you didn't have any understanding of Mr. Depp showing up late for work on Pirates 5, but in fact, you received this text from Tracy Jacobs that says, thanks, I got a call from Disney last week saying he showed up 5 hours late for ADR work in London for Pirates 5. I really need to speak to him before he starts work on his next project in LA. Did I read that right? Permission to publish this, Your Honor?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Do you want me to respond?
I just wanted to ask you if I read that right, that you received this text message saying in part, I got a call from Disney last week saying he showed up 5 hours late for ADR work in London for Pirates 5. I really need to speak to him before he starts work on this next project in LA. Did I read that right?
I believe you read it right.
Thank you. Now, at some point you became familiar, you can go ahead and take that down, please. Thank you. At some point you became familiar, as you testified, with what Amber planned to do with money that she got from Mr. Depp in the divorce, correct?
It was the understanding from the beginning the money would be contributed to charities.
To two charities, to the
Contracts were
Children's
drafted in that manner.
Hospital of LA and the ACLU, correct?
That is correct.
And as we discussed, you wrote checks to those two organizations that were part of Mr. Depp's divorce payment, but they were just sent directly to those organizations, correct?
Yes.
Can you please pull up Defendant's Exhibit 1639? Actually, let's do Defendant's Exhibit. Yeah, we'll do 1639. Thanks. Mr. White, this is a letter from you to the ACLU Foundation dated August 24th, 2016, correct?
Yes.
And as part of your work for your 100 or so high-profile, high-net-worth clients, you've helped clients set up pledged contributions to charities before, correct?
Yes.
And sometimes those payments are made over a period of time, correct?
Yes.
Charitable donations aren't always paid at once, correct?
That is correct.
And when you make payments on behalf of your clients to charities, is it customary for you to send a cover letter like this?
In some instances, yes. In some instances, no.
Okay.
But in all instances, that there is a signed agreement and an understanding of when the payments will be made.
Sir, that wasn't my question. My question was just, is it customary for you to send a letter like this? And I think you've answered that. And so when you send letters like this on behalf of your clients, do you prepare such letters in the ordinary course of your business?
In some instances, yes.
And in the instances in which you prepare those letters, do you then maintain those letters in the ordinary course of your business?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for admission of Defendant's Exhibit 1639.
Any objection? No. All right, 1639 in evidence, and you can publish it to the jury. Thank you.
And Michelle, if you could please just scroll through, Mr. White, I just want you to see there's the letter here. We'll come back to the letter. And then there's the check that you're making out to the ACLU. Then there's, I guess, the envelope or something, right?
Correct.
Okay. You can go back to the letter, please. So in this cover letter, you tell the ACLU that you're enclosing a check for $100,000 and that the donation is being made in accordance with Ms. Heard's pledged gift of $3.5 million to the ACLU Foundation, correct?
Yes.
And you also write that the check represents, just go ahead, that the check represents the first of multiple scheduled installments, correct?
It was my understanding that she
just
was
asking
going
if
to
that's what you
contribute
wrote. I'm just asking if that's
$3,500,000
what
to
you wrote,
children.
sir.
You've asked me a question. I'm trying to respond.
No, I was actually just asking if that's what you wrote.
Would you ask the question again, please?
Yeah, you write, this check represents the first of multiple scheduled installments to honor the full amount of Ms. Heard's $3.5 million pledged gift.
It was my understanding she was going to contribute the money, and that's
Okay,
consistent
sir,
with my
I just
response.
asked if that's what you wrote. I think you've answered that. Can we please pull up Exhibit 1596?
Your Honor, before we go to the next exhibit, can I raise an issue at the,
Okay,
at
sure.
the bar? Thanks.
1, 5.
Mr. White, is this a letter similar to what we just looked at for the ACLU, a letter that you wrote that accompanied the check that you sent to the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles Foundation?
Yes.
And this letter and whatever payment, this letter is one that you would have prepared in the ordinary course of business, correct?
Yes.
And you would have maintained this letter in the ordinary course of business, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd move for the admission of Exhibit 1596.
All right, 1596 in evidence. You can publish it to the jury.
And Mr. White, this letter also says at the bottom that it represents, the check that accompanies this letter represents the first of multiple scheduled installments to honor the full amount of Ms. Heard's $3.5 million pledged gift, correct?
When I composed the letter, that was my understanding that she was going to give $3.5 million to charity.
You're really not answering my question. My question was simply, I understand that you want to speak your own narrative here, but my question was simply that this letter says that this check represents the first of multiple scheduled installments to honor the full amount of Ms. Heard's $3.5 million pledged gift, correct?
We can both read the letter, and the answer is yes.
Thank you, sir. Now, you hosted a dinner with Mr. Depp and Adam Waldman in 2016, correct?
I do recall that.
And that was the first time that Mr. Depp had been introduced to Mr. Waldman, correct?
I do not know that, to be factual.
Now, you are not an expert on California divorce law, right?
Correct.
And you're not an expert on the division of marital property in California, correct?
I'm not an expert, but I've been actively involved in numerous cases involving the dissolution of marriage and the related proceeds are distributed to each respective party.
Now, you can't give any sort of legal opinion or testimony as to whether or not Ms. Heard would have been entitled to more in the divorce settlement with Mr. Depp than she received, correct?
I'm not an attorney at law.
Okay.
I don't render legal opinions.
So, you've never met Amber Heard, correct?
That is correct.
The first time you've ever seen her in person is here in this courtroom this afternoon, correct?
That's my recollection.
And you have no personal knowledge of whether Mr. Depp engaged in domestic abuse against my client, correct?
I've never witnessed him involved in any abuse, and obviously I've never met her. I could not respond to that inquiry.
So the answer to my question is that it's correct, that you have no personal knowledge of whether Mr. Depp engaged in domestic abuse against Amber Heard.
That is correct. I have no knowledge.
Nothing further.
Period.
All right, redirect. Mr. Denison?
Can we pull up defendants 1596? Sir, could you read the last line of your letter?
This check represents the first of multiple scheduled installments to honor the full amount of Ms. Heard's $3.5 million pledged gift.
What was the schedule for those payments?
They were scheduled. I don't know the schedule because I don't have a copy of any pledge that she made, if that's your question.
Okay, thank you very much. One more question. Has Mr. Depp paid all his taxes?
Yes, he has. He's fully current with all of his federal, foreign, and state tax obligations.
Thank you.
All right, no further questions, Mr. Denison?
No further questions.
All right, is this witness subject to recall? No. No? All right, Mr. White, you're free to go. Thank you, sir. Just be very careful stepping down there, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Have a good day. All right, your next witness is remote witness, correct? All right, let me just give him, don't, wait a moment.
Your Honor, may we just ask what witness they plan to call?
I see a Mr. Connolly in the lobby, so I'm assuming that must be the one. Okay, good. Good, I'm glad we got that one. All right.